You won't believe how calm I was when I watched my wife fall in love with another man, right in front of me. Claire leaned across the restaurant table, laughing at something Adam said. Her hand brushed his wrist, lingering just a moment too long. Long enough for anyone watching to understand what was really happening. Anyone except the man she thought was too blind to see. 3 tables away, I sat alone, a glass of bourbon sweating in my hand, pretending to scroll through my phone. The noise of cutlery and low chatter filled the room, but every time she laughed, it cut through the sound like glass against steel. She looked radiant, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years, and that's what hurt most. That glow used to belong to me. Claire always needed an audience. Even back in the early days, she thrived on attention, the way a fire thrives on oxygen. I was fine being the quiet one, the anchor. She said she loved that about me, my calm, my steadiness. But calm becomes dull when someone's addicted to chaos. I didn't change. She just outgrew the peace she once claimed to crave. For months, she had been pulling away. Late nights at work. Locked phones. Perfume she hadn't worn in a decade. And then Adam appeared. The promotion-hungry charmer with the kind of smile that made people forget their boundaries. I saw it all unfolding before she thought to hide it. She thought I wouldn't notice. She mistook my silence for weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was waiting. From my corner table, I watched her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a move I'd seen 100 times. She always did it when she wanted to look effortlessly beautiful. Adam reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. The look she gave him could have burned the whole place down. He didn't know it, but he was sitting in the middle of an evidence file I'd been building for weeks. The private investigator I'd hired had already given me everything: photos, texts, hotel receipts. Enough to end her game cleanly. I wasn't here to confront her. I was here to confirm what I already knew. To see if the woman I married had truly disappeared or if there was still some piece of her left worth saving. But watching her laugh, I realized something. She wasn't ashamed. Not even a flicker of guilt crossed her face. She was proud of herself, bold in her betrayal. She wanted to be seen. Maybe she wanted me to see. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Everything's ready whenever you are. I looked up. She was touching Adam's arm again, eyes glowing with the thrill of getting away with it. The irony would have been poetic if it weren't so tragic. I sipped my drink, steady and silent. She thought she'd broken me months ago, that I was too numb to react. But in truth, I'd never been more alert. The patience that once kept our marriage steady was now the blade I was sharpening. When she leaned in to kiss Adam's cheek before he stood to take a call, I took a photo. Not for me, just for the file. Then I stood, left a few bills on the table, and walked out. She didn't notice. The night air outside was cold, crisp, and still. I paused at the corner, looked back through the glass window, and saw her alone, scrolling her phone, unaware that everything she thought she controlled was already slipping from her hands. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something she'd tried to take from me, my dignity. As I walked toward my car, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt done. The kind of done that doesn't come with shouting or tears, but with clarity. I'd played the fool long enough. By the time she got home tonight, she'd still think she was winning. She'd smile that same smug smile, kiss me goodnight, and pretend nothing happened. And I'd let her, because she had no idea that her entire life was already one signature away from ending. I never realized how heavy silence could feel until I learned to use it as a weapon. When Claire came home that night, she smelled like wine and someone else's cologne. I was sitting on the couch, the TV on mute, a football game playing for no one in particular. She closed the front door softly, as if noise might wake the guilt she refused to feel. "Hey, you're still up?" she asked, voice sweet, almost rehearsed. I looked up and smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. Her heels clicked against the tile as she crossed the living room, slipping her purse onto the counter. "Long dinner," she said, stretching. Adam had a lot to discuss about the new project. I nodded, eyes back on the TV. "Must have been a hell of a project. You've been glowing all week." Her hand froze mid-motion, just a split second, but enough for me to notice. Then came that practiced laugh, the one she used at parties when she wanted to sound carefree. "Oh, stop. It's just work, Mark. Don't get all jealous now." Jealous. That word again. She loved to use it, to frame my intuition as insecurity. It gave her the upper hand, made her feel powerful. I let her have it because power is the easiest thing to take from someone once they stop guarding it. I stood, stretched, and turned off the TV. Glad to hear it's going well, I said evenly. I'm heading to bed. She watched me walk past her, probably waiting for a flicker of confrontation, a hint of suspicion she could exploit. When she didn't get it, I could feel her confusion like static in the air. That was good. Let her think the leash was longer than it was. In our bedroom, her vanity light glowed faintly. The red dress she'd worn to dinner was draped over the chair, carelessly tossed, as if it hadn't been the same one she used to wear for me. I paused, ran my hand along the fabric, then turned away. I didn't need to smell it to know it reeked of betrayal. When she joined me in bed, she didn't touch me, just climbed in, phone in hand, thumbs tapping rapidly beneath the sheets. She probably thought I was half asleep, but I was watching her reflection in the dresser mirror. The faint smile she wore as she typed was all the confession I needed. The next morning, I woke early. She was still asleep, one arm across my side of the bed, like muscle memory hadn't caught up with reality. I made coffee quietly, scrolling through the messages my private investigator had sent overnight. Photos of her and Adam leaving the restaurant. A shot of them at the bar, his hand low on her back. Timestamps, dates, receipts. Every lie she'd ever told was neatly cataloged in a folder labeled Claire. I wasn't angry, just focused. I emailed the files to my lawyer, then deleted the evidence from my phone. There was no need to rush. Timing was everything. When she came downstairs an hour later, she was all sunshine and small talk. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Had some things to sort out," I replied. "Work things." "Something like that." She smiled, leaning against the counter. "I hope you're not burning yourself out. You've been a little tense lately." I almost laughed. Tense. That was her word for distance, for detachment, for the slow unraveling she didn't yet realize was deliberate. "Nothing I can't handle," I said, rinsing my mug. "By the way, I might be working late a few nights this week. Don't wait up." Her eyes flickered. "Oh, okay." That small reaction told me everything. Claire liked control, knowing where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. The moment she felt uncertainty, her confidence cracked. By the time I left for work, her smile had dimmed just a little. And that was perfect. At the office, I called my attorney again. "We're still good for Friday." "Everything's ready," he confirmed. "Just say the word." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. Not yet. She needs to think she's safe first. That evening, I came home to find her cooking. A rare occurrence lately. She'd set the table, lit candles, even played soft music, like she was trying to rewind us back to something that didn't exist anymore. "Wow," I said, setting down my briefcase. "This is a surprise." She beamed. I felt bad for being so busy. Thought we could have a nice night, just the two of us. I smiled, sitting down. "Sounds perfect." Dinner was good. Too good. Every gesture, every laugh, every compliment felt like part of a script. And I played along. Because the best way to dismantle a lie is to let the liar perform until the curtain drops on its own. After dessert, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine, the same way she'd done to Adam the night before. "I missed this," she said softly. I looked at her, calm, unreadable. "Did you?" For a moment, something faltered in her eyes. Guilt? Maybe. Or maybe just the fear of realizing I wasn't reacting the way I used to. "Of course," she whispered, forcing a smile. I squeezed her hand gently, then pulled away. "I'm glad." And that was it. I left her sitting there, blinking in the candlelight, wondering why victory suddenly felt hollow. Because for the first time in our marriage, Claire wasn't in control of the game. She just didn't know yet that I'd already changed the rules. You ever watch someone dig their own grave while thinking they're building a throne? That's what it felt like, living with Claire that week. By Thursday, she was radiant again. The kind of radiant that comes from secrets, not happiness. She hummed as she got dressed, texting while pretending she wasn't. Her perfume hit the air before she even walked past me. Something floral, expensive, foreign. The kind you wear when you're not trying to come home right after work. "You heading to the office early?" I asked, setting down my coffee mug. She paused, her lipstick poised mid-stroke. "Yeah, Adam and I have that investor meeting today. Could go late." I nodded. "Don't work too hard." She smiled in the mirror, satisfied by my indifference. That's the thing about people like Claire. They don't know what to do when you stop playing your role. She needed my frustration to validate her excitement, my anger to feed her superiority. Without it, She was performing for an audience that had left the theater. When she finally left, I went upstairs and opened her closet. It wasn't invasion, it was confirmation. I already knew what I'd find. Clothes she hadn't worn for me in years, gifts that weren't from me, and a new red dress still with the boutique tag attached. Same store Adam's wife had once posted about online. Interesting coincidence. I picked up my phone and called my investigator, Frank. She's meeting him again today, right? Yep, he said. Downtown. Same restaurant. 7 o'clock. You want me to follow them after? No, I said quietly. That won't be necessary. Tonight's the last act. Frank hesitated. You sure you don't want to see it through? Oh, I'll see it, I replied. Just not the way she expects. The rest of the day was calm, deliberately so. I went to work, returned calls, even had lunch with my business partner. Every moment felt lighter than it should have. Like I was walking through the eye of a storm I already knew the path of. When I got home, Claire was still out. The house was spotless, but empty in that quiet way that happens when affection has left the walls. I sat down at my desk and opened the folder labeled Final Draft. Inside were the divorce papers, perfectly typed, signed by me, and prepped by my attorney. Everything was there. Asset division, spousal exclusion clauses, the photos, the message transcripts, all neatly compiled. If she wanted control, she was about to get it, just not the kind she imagined. At 7:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Frank. They just sat down. Red dress, corner booth. He kissed her hand. You were right. She's not hiding anymore. I stared at the screen for a moment, then opened my banking app. 1 click, 2 clicks. Every joint account, frozen. The car lease, revoked. Her credit cards, canceled, all except one, just enough to pay for dinner. By the time she got the bill, the illusion of control would collapse. At 8:16 p.m., I sent her a text. Hope dinner's good. Don't worry about me, Red Heart. 5 minutes later, she responded. We're just having dinner, don't worry, Red Heart. Seconds passed. Then I replied. Divorce papers are already filed. What's there to worry about? I imagined her face when she read it. The slow freeze of her expression. The way her pulse would quicken. The exact moment when arrogance turns into dread. I poured myself a drink and sat back, letting the moment settle. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was release. Years of being her emotional punching bag, her convenient husband prop, her quiet audience, it all ended with one message. At 8:43 p.m., Frank texted again. Adam looks uncomfortable. She's on her phone. Something's wrong. Waiter came back twice. Her card declined. She's arguing. He looks done. I smiled faintly. I didn't need to be there to know how the scene unfolded. I could see it clearly. The whispers, the stares, the subtle horror of realizing that the life she curated so carefully was dissolving under the weight of her own pride. By the time she made it home, everything was in place. Her clothes were packed neatly in boxes by the door. The locks changed. The envelope with the papers lay on the kitchen counter beside her favorite wine glass, the one she always saved for special occasions. I left a note beside it. You wanted control. Now you have it, over nothing. Then I left. Drove to the lakeside cabin I'd rented under my name months ago, long before I knew how the story would end. Out there, the air was cold and clean. The kind that reminds you what peace feels like when you've been living in chaos too long. I poured another bourbon, stared out at the dark water, and thought about her face when she'd opened that envelope. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the background character in someone else's story. The game was over. But what she didn't know yet was that the real reckoning hadn't even begun. You'd be surprised how quiet victory feels when you don't need anyone to see it. Claire didn't call that night. Not once. No angry texts, no apologies, no begging. Just silence. I knew her well enough to know that silence from her didn't mean calm. It meant calculation. She was probably pacing her hotel room somewhere, trying to make sense of how her little empire had evaporated in a single evening. I woke early at the cabin. The lake was still glassy. Mist hovered over the water like smoke from a dying fire. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and watched the sun creep up behind the trees. The world felt clean again. At 8:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew it was her before I even looked. Mark, please. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Then, calmly, I put my phone face down on the table and took another sip of coffee. She tried again 30 minutes later. You've made your point. But you can't just erase me like this. We can work something out. That was the thing about Claire. She never understood that actions had weight. She'd spent years treating emotions like chess pieces, shifting them around to win whatever argument or momentary thrill she wanted. But when you burn every bridge, you don't get to negotiate with the ashes. By noon, my lawyer confirmed the filings had gone through. The accounts were legally frozen, the property in my name secured. I own the house, the business, the vehicles, everything she'd ever taken for granted. I sent her a single text. Check your email. I'd copied her on the official notice. The subject line read, finalized documentation, Morrison versus Morrison. The irony of her maiden name, now standing across from mine in legal opposition, wasn't lost on me. An hour later, my phone rang again, this time a call. I answered, because part of me wanted to hear how she'd sound stripped of the arrogance that once defined her. Mark. Her voice cracked halfway through my name. You really did it. You actually filed. I told you I would, I said, my tone even. But this isn't fair. You blindsided me. Fair, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. You think fairness applies here? I made a mistake, she said quickly. A stupid, meaningless mistake. But we can fix this. I cut her off. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, leaving your ring on the counter. What you did wasn't a mistake, Claire. It was a choice. She went silent for a beat, and I could almost hear her breathing quicken. Then her voice hardened. You're not the saint you think you are. You love the control, too. You just hit it better. That was her last defense, blame. If she couldn't win the game, she'd rewrite the rules. Maybe you're right, I said calmly. But the difference is, I didn't destroy anyone to feel powerful. There was a faint noise on her end. A choked sound, half sob, half frustration. You're enjoying this, aren't you? No, I said softly. I'm just done pretending I deserve less than honesty. Then I hung up. The rest of the day passed quietly. No phone calls. No drama. Just peace. A rare, unfamiliar kind. But peace never lasts when the person you left behind still believes she's the victim. That night, I got a text from an unknown number again. This time, it wasn't from her. It was from Frank, my investigator. You might want to know, she's been calling Adam nonstop. He's not answering. Word is, his wife found out. She kicked him out last night. I stared at the message, a small pang of irony hitting me. The man she risked everything for couldn't even risk returning her call. Let her spin, I replied. She'll stop when she realizes there's no one left to catch her. I turned my phone off after that. For once, I didn't care what she did next. The following morning, when I drove back into the city to meet with my lawyer, I passed our old neighborhood. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The kind of small that happens when the illusion of love is gone. I saw her car in the driveway. She must have gone back to collect her things. The blinds were drawn, but through the faint slats, I could see her moving slowly from room to room, folding clothes, touching walls, maybe looking for something that would make her feel like the past few years weren't a total loss. I parked across the street for a moment, just watching. Not out of pity, out of closure. Then she turned toward the window. Our eyes met through the glass. She froze. I didn't. I raised my coffee cup in a small, almost polite gesture of farewell, then pulled away from the curb. As I turned the corner, I caught a glimpse of her silhouette still standing there, motionless. That was the last time I saw her. Or so I thought. Because a week later, she'd find a new way to crawl back into my life. And this time, it wouldn't be for love. It would be for revenge. You think you've buried the past, but people like Claire don't stay underground. They dig until they find daylight, even if they have to claw through the dirt with their bare hands. It was a week after the divorce papers were filed when she came back, not in person, not yet, but through the places she knew could still reach me. The first sign was subtle. My business accountant called on a Tuesday morning. Mark, he said, cautious. We've had a few odd inquiries about the company. Someone's been asking for access to your financials, claiming to be your partner. I didn't have a partner. Not anymore. She used your last name, he added. Sounded convincing. I almost laughed. Of course she did. When charm failed her, she'd always reach for deception. But now, stripped of power and pretense, she was reaching for the one thing she couldn't stand losing, relevance. That afternoon, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. No greeting. Just a single sentence. You can freeze accounts, but you can't erase me. No signature. She didn't need one. I didn't reply. I didn't block her, either. Silence had become my weapon, and she'd never learned how to fight without words. Still, I won't lie, it got under my skin. Because that line wasn't about money. It was about control. She wasn't trying to get anything back. She was trying to prove she could still reach me. 2 nights later, I found her waiting outside my office. The city had gone quiet. Late evening, the streets silvered by rain. She stood by her car, wearing a long coat and that same red lipstick she'd worn the night I caught her with Adam. "Mark," she said softly, stepping forward. "We need to talk." I didn't stop walking. "No, Claire. You need to talk. I'm done listening." She flinched. "You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted any of this?" "I don't think about you at all anymore," I said. That hit her. I saw it. The tremor in her jaw, the way her eyes flashed before she masked it again. "You're not who I thought you were." "Good," I said evenly. "You never really looked." Rain started to fall, tapping against the pavement like quiet applause. She crossed her arms, her voice sharpening. "I could ruin you if I wanted to." "You already tried," I replied. "But you can't ruin someone who's not playing your game." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she laughed, soft, bitter, broken. "You're not even angry." "Anger is a luxury I don't owe you," I said. "You taught me that." She looked away, blinking fast. "He left," she whispered finally. "Adam. His wife found out. He called me a mistake. I lost everything, Mark." I didn't say I know, though I did. Frank had told me days ago. Instead, I said the truth, the kind of truth that lands like glass breaking quietly in the dark. "You didn't lose everything, Claire. You threw it away." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. I walked past her toward my car, feeling her eyes on me. When I reached the door, she said, "You'll regret this." I paused, hand on the handle, and turned just enough to meet her gaze. "No," I said calmly. "You will." I drove away without looking back. But the reflection of her in my rearview mirror, small, shaking, alone in the rain, stayed burned in my mind longer than I expected. Not out of sympathy, out of finality. Because that was the night I realized something important. Revenge doesn't end when the papers are signed. It ends when the person who betrayed you finally understands they were never your equal, not in strength, not in love, and not in the silence that follows. You don't really understand someone until you've seen what they do with power and what they become without it. The weeks after that confrontation blurred into a rhythm of silence and small recoveries. I went back to running my company, took early morning walks by the lake, and rediscovered what quiet felt like when it wasn't loaded with tension. For the first time in years, I was just me. Not someone's husband, not someone's emotional anchor, just Mark. But peace never holds when the past refuses to die. It started again with whispers. A client meeting canceled without explanation. Then another postponed. By the third one, I started paying attention. My assistant, Lena, looked uncomfortable when I asked what was going on. "Some rumors, sir," she said carefully. "About misused company funds. People are saying you moved money out of the joint accounts before the divorce was finalized." I leaned back in my chair, the truth dawning instantly. "And who started these rumors?" She hesitated. "Her. Claire." Of course she did. The woman couldn't stand losing the last bit of control she thought she had. She didn't care about money. She cared about perception, about rewriting the narrative until she looked like the victim and I, the cold, manipulative husband. By that afternoon, I'd already spoken to my lawyer. Everything was in order. No legal ground to stand on, no loose ends to exploit. But that didn't matter to her. Claire didn't need truth. She needed attention. Still, I underestimated how far she'd go. 2 days later, a journalist showed up outside my office building. He wasn't aggressive, just curious. "Mr. Williams," he called, notebook in hand. "Care to comment on the allegations your ex-wife made?" I stopped mid-step. "Allegations?" He flipped a page. "Claims of emotional manipulation, financial coercion, psychological control." Her words, not mine. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I just stared at him until his confidence faltered. "You can print whatever she tells you," I said quietly. "But I suggest you ask her for proof before you try to sell fiction as fact." Then I walked past him without another word. That night, I sat in the dark at the cabin again, the fire crackling low. The folder that had once held all the evidence of her affair lay in front of me. I'd never looked at it after the divorce was finalized. But now, it had a purpose again. She wanted to play the narrative game. Fine. I'd give her the ending she was trying to twist. I spent hours compiling everything: photos, bank statements, messages, timestamps. Then I made one final call to Frank. Get this to the right hands, I told him. Quietly. No headlines, no interviews. Just truth where it belongs. Understood, he said. You sure you want to do this? Once it's out, it's out. Truth doesn't need permission, I replied. It just needs light. 2 weeks later, the whispers stopped. Her name started appearing in smaller, uglier ways. An expose on workplace misconduct, a leaked set of messages between her and Adam discussing discreet meetings. The company she worked for quietly suspended her pending internal review. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in watching someone implode, not even someone who tried to burn me down first. But there was peace in knowing that I didn't need to lie to win. Claire tried reaching out once more after that. A short email. You think you've won, but you don't understand what it's like to lose everything. I read it twice before deleting it. She was wrong, of course. I understood loss better than she ever would. I'd lost the illusion that love was enough to fix someone who didn't want to be saved. And I'd gained something far more valuable in return: clarity. That night, I stood by the lake, the moon's reflection rippling across the water. The world was quiet again, and for once, it wasn't pretending. Revenge hadn't been the goal. Truth was. And now that I had it, there was nothing left for her to take. You know what real power feels like. It's not shouting in a courtroom or throwing accusations across the table. It's sitting there, calm and unshaken, while the truth dismantles someone piece by piece. 3 months after I thought it was over, the official summons arrived. Claire had filed a counterclaim: emotional abuse, manipulation, financial coercion. It read like a script from a bad TV drama, every line designed to paint me as the villain in her carefully rewritten story. I didn't even get angry. I just smiled. My lawyer, Ethan, slid the papers across the conference table, his tone measured but firm. She's desperate. This isn't about justice. It's about attention, or maybe damage control. I nodded. She wants a stage. Let her have one. The hearing was set for early June. Family court, quiet and impersonal, with walls the color of faded beige and a judge who looked like he'd seen every kind of human misery twice over. When I arrived, Claire was already there, dressed in gray, her hair tied neatly, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Adam wasn't beside her. He wouldn't have been, not after the scandal that gutted both their careers. She looked at me when I sat down across the aisle. For a moment, the air between us was heavy, the kind of silence you could cut with a knife. Then she looked away. The proceedings began slowly, her attorney painting her as a woman broken by control, by fear, by a marriage that had stifled her spirit. Every word felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror. But the moment she started crying, those practiced, silent tears she used to get her way, I realized something. She still didn't understand. She thought this was about sympathy, about performance. But truth doesn't need an audience. It only needs evidence. When Ethan stood, the atmosphere shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize anything. He simply placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. Your Honor, he began. We have documentation, text messages, hotel receipts, recorded conversations, confirming an extramarital affair that began 8 months before Mrs. Morrison's accusations. We also have evidence of financial transfers made from joint accounts into private ones under her name. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. As the documents were presented, Claire's composure began to crack. Each photo, each message, each timestamp was a hammer hitting the glass of her performance. She tried interrupting once, her voice trembling. Those were taken out of context. Context doesn't erase content, Ethan replied evenly. The courtroom fell silent except for the rustle of paper and the slow, inevitable collapse of her story. When the last piece of evidence was submitted, an email from Adam confirming the affair, she stopped pretending to cry. She just sat there, eyes vacant, hands folded tightly in her lap, like she was holding on to the last thread of her old life. The judge's decision came swiftly. My claims upheld. Her counterclaim dismissed. All shared assets awarded to me. She was granted nothing beyond personal effects. When it was over, I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. But as I walked past her table, I caught her reflection in the polished wood, pale, hollow, deflated. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered like vultures, but I ignored them. I wasn't there for spectacle. I was there for peace. Ethan caught up to me at the curb. "You handled that well," he said. "I didn't handle anything," I replied. "I just told the truth and waited." He nodded, understanding. "What now?" I looked out at the skyline, the sunlight reflecting off glass towers, bright and indifferent. "Now," I said, "I start over." Behind me, I heard the courthouse doors open. For a moment, I considered turning back. Instead, I kept walking. Some endings don't need words. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Claire finally understood what that silence meant. You don't heal from betrayal by forgiving the person who broke you. You heal by realizing they never had the power to break you in the first place. It's strange how silence feels different after a war. For years, it had been a thing I feared. The sound between arguments, the pause before another manipulation, the quiet that always came right before she'd twist the knife again. But after the trial, silence became something else. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was proof. Proof that peace existed when I stopped letting her define it. Claire didn't contact me again. Not directly, anyway. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd left town a few weeks after the hearing, sold what little she had left, moved somewhere coastal. A friend of a friend said she was working part-time at a boutique, living in a rented apartment near the beach. That was it. No new scandal. No headlines. Just quiet. I didn't hate her for it. I didn't pity her, either. I'd stopped feeling anything that tied me to her name. My life rebuilt itself in small, deliberate steps. Mornings started early again. Coffee before sunrise, the smell of sawdust and varnish in my workshop, projects that didn't need to impress anyone but me. I spent weekends fixing up the old cabin by the lake, turning it into a space that felt more like home than any house we'd ever owned together. Sometimes, I'd find remnants of her there, little ghosts of memory. A sweater she left years ago, a book she never finished. Once, I found her handwriting carved faintly into the underside of the kitchen drawer. C+M, always. I traced my fingers over it for a long moment, then sanded it down until the letters vanished beneath the wood grain. It wasn't bitterness, it was closure. About 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Adam. Not on purpose. Fate just has a dark sense of humor. I was leaving a hardware store when I saw him standing by the exit, thinner than I remembered, his suit a little too big for him now. "Mark," he said, hesitant. "Can we talk?" I studied him for a moment. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. I nodded. "You've got 2 minutes." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes downcast. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. She told me you didn't know. I should have walked away." I looked at him, not with anger, not with sympathy, just clarity. "You didn't ruin my life, Adam. You just showed me what kind of woman I married." He nodded slowly. She's not doing well." "I know," I said quietly. "That's not my responsibility anymore." We parted without a handshake. Just two men who'd both learned what happens when you mistake desire for destiny. That night, back at the cabin, I stood on the porch watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the lake. The world was still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask for noise to prove it's alive. I thought about everything. The laughter, the lies, the years spent trying to make someone happy who didn't even know what happiness meant. And then, I thought about what came next. Peace isn't cinematic. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks. It just slips in one day, sits beside you, and stays. I poured a bourbon, the same brand I'd ordered that night at the restaurant where it all began, and raised my glass to the dark water. "To silence," I said softly, "and to never mistaking it for weakness again." The wind carried the words away. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the story had truly ended, not with revenge, not with victory, but with freedom. Because sometimes the real justice isn't in watching the guilty fall. It's in walking away so completely that they can't even find your shadow.